All right. So here's the deal. I've been obviously, dude, there's everybody, all they're talking about right now is the PTU drama, and I'm bored, right? I think everybody said what needs to be said. It's kind of the balls in Star Citizen's court at this point. Space Tomato, though, 9 days ago, this never came up on my recommended and really bothers me, put out a video titled This. 4 years of Star Citizen. I've covered Star Citizen for 4 years. This is what they don't tell you. Ooh, what don't they tell you, right? Seems so juicy.
This video is sponsored in part by my supporters. For exclusive videos, referrals, and more, check out Patreon down below. I began covering Star Citizen in some form back in 2018. I started out making retrospective videos which reviewed the...
Wow. 2018. First off, 2018 was... So this might have been a video that he posted to his Patreon. So 2018 was a long time ago, but it also feels like Tomato's been a part of the community forever, right?
Weekly shows from a year prior to...
But he's like kind of new still.
Determine if any progress was actually being made with Star Citizen. But I was not ready for just how deep that would get over the next few years. By the way, please don't go watch those videos. Please. That was almost 5 years ago now. Since then, I've gone through the usual cycle of rabid interest in the game, predictions that ended up being true 10% of the time, constant disappointments from the other 90%, some hype, further disappointment, and finally leveled out into a calm but collected understanding, mostly. Game development is hard.
Yeah, none of us understand anything, so...
Building companies is hard, and pleasing the masses is hard. Trying to do all three of these things at the same time on a global scale for...
Okay, so this video is not old. So he's been around for 5 years.
From zero, relatively speaking, probably shouldn't be attempted. But here we are. And I've been covering it virtually every day of every week of the last 4 years. And I think it's given me a good amount of clarity on the project and the company building it that I'd like to share with you. This video will be a bit different. It'll be more of a candid presentations of these things I've learned over the last few years, both good and bad, as well as how I'm feeling about it all. Many of you have already come to these conclusions, but hopefully I can add some more context. If you'd like to support this work, my family, and future content, consider subscribing or joining on Patreon for more exclusive videos like this. And thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk.
Oh, here we go. Hype, communication, and expectations.
Star Citizen has a way of showing you the potential without actually quite reaching it. This is largely due to the incomplete nature of the engine. A lot of the more amazing features in the game would be much more useful, the details more meaningful, and the experience more consistent if the engine was complete. Stability, networking, hell, even VoIP would all provide a better experience, but...
See, like, part of it is if the engine was complete, but if you keep changing the scope of the game to force the engine to have to react to that or work with that, then how is that really a thing, right? Like, obviously the engine's going to constantly improve and evolve like we see in chat, but when the scope also does, you're never going to reach it's like, we all know that Star Citizen won't be a finished product in terms of, like, it's an MMO. They'll release DLC type of things, right? Like, there'll always be more. But the idea of a released product always seems so far out once you start paying attention, right? Because they keep moving the goalposts further and further and further. Or one of the goalposts is incredible. It's an 80-yard field goal, right? Like, it's impossible. So, which is server meshing, is what seems like we've been suffering for essentially the entire time Space Tomato's been covering the project, right?
That's not all there is to it. Being a game with open development...
CitizenCon 2018 was the what is released, these are the pillars, this is what we need to do to make Star Citizen. And that was a moment where I was like, all right, they're trying to make it. They're transitioning, and we never got there. We're not even close.
It comes with its problems and its perks. I've never seen a game developer share more about its product and development than CIG. Interestingly, that's not to say it's completely open. While they give us a lot of info and ever-changing roadmap sharing the following patch, a Gantt chart showing the features still to be made, monthly reports of news from around all 5 studios, and 2 weekly shows that share the latest development and discussion for most weeks throughout the year, they're still quite selective with what they tell us. That being said, this open communication gives us a lot of face time with developers. Developers who are just as passionate and excited about a game like this as we are, who are sometimes shaking with the chance to talk about their work. Work that may...
And that is part of the problem. It's what's so awesome, but also part of the problem. Like, I think Richard Tyrer is like one of the best examples. And his team has delivered better than most, I would say, on the products that they have pushed, right? The, anything around the actor status. All right, this is how actor status is working, so on and so forth. And what gets delivered is essentially what he says, where like a lot of the things are, okay, well, this is the first implementation, but what we said was what we could do or what we want to do or what, and it's sometimes hard to tell what they are doing and what they intend to do in the future, because we can't keep talking about the future, because the future in this game is always way too far away than the backer is led on.
Or may not make it into a feature launch. You get where I'm going with this. A lot can be said offhand in a situation like this that's taken as fact or promise. And that's where your problems start to come in. These problems can be small, like the slip of a new vehicle being worked on but not yet revealed.
And I think we're moving on to the X1 after that. Yeah. So hopefully that comes out this year. hopefully, I don't know. Maybe.
Like this, I'm sorry, is the stupidest thing that I see them do. Like, the Origin X1, talking about that. Ooh, no, can't do that. Oh, let me face palm because somebody released that we are going to work on one of the most pointless things in the entire game. Like, this shows you where they are with communication. Him saying that doesn't matter. Even if he said the Pioneer, it doesn't matter. Well, maybe if he says the Pioneer, it matters. Like, we're talking about like a $30 thing, right? And we've already purchased the X1. It's just but for me, it's more the way they react to it. Because that means to me that they have, well, we had all these marketing initiatives planned behind this thing, and you just ruined them, Osmer. Right? And that's the name of the developer who, I think that's his name, that leaked their stupid little vehicle, right? That doesn't matter. Also, yeah, I purchased that thing 6-7 years ago. Right? So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, this is nuts. Like, why do we have this way of doing things? And I think it's because of like the Banu Merchantman and some drama that's been around chips. But at the same time, like, is it really that big of a deal to explain what you intend to work on? I mean, this video is pretty old. There's been very little talk about the X1 since.
It's up in the air. We'll see.
Or many release dates for major patches and features that continue to be missed. In the latter case, it becomes old rather quickly. Things like the briefing room in 2020 or the road to 4.0 in 2023 also highlight an inconsistency with messaging when only a single or few episodes of an episodic update series are published with no follow-up or additional information.
I think that has been both a good and bad thing over the years. Specifically over the last like year or so. It tells me that they're like trying new things, but it also tells me that their ideas are I mean, are relatively bad, right? This one was a terrible idea from the start, especially without showing any, like, they did a way better job at the end of CitizenCon, which was the worst part of CitizenCon, sharing, like, hey, PU related things in Squadron. This is what it looks like. This is what you can expect, in terms of polish going forward. Cool, right? This was ridiculous. Hey, look at this asset we made. Who cares, right? But Road to 4.0, I mean, we called that out as idiotic from the beginning. It was marketing ploy, hype generator for, when you don't know if you're going to release 4.0. And guess what? They didn't, right? They didn't. And that's why they dropped those episodes, because they look stupid. How do you make Road to 4.0 episodes for 2.5 years? You can't.
These things become frustrating for the players and aren't really something you have to deal with too often with game companies. Most game companies would show off a vertical slice demo, some edited showcase of gameplay, and a few trailers, all checked over relentlessly to make sure they don't show any mistakes.
Yep.
Seeing the actual development
and show just enough Easter eggs, right?
Of assets, behaviors, features, and locales from...
They actually have content. So the Easter eggs show what you will be able to do in the game, where Star Citizen is constantly, going, emergent gameplay, guys. That's what we have.
Concept all the way to in-game gets players hyped and acts as its own form of marketing, but oftentimes a feature needs to be put aside for a while, and players are never informed.
God.
This leads to many believing features have just been removed from the plan entirely.
Remember this? Every time anybody goes, well, the stand system is done because all the planets are in. This is in my opinion, one of the most important things in the Stanton system. And they have completely ignored it since this specific update. Not a word. Do you guys even know what this is? How many of you know what this is in chat? Yeah, this is a defining feature of the Stanton system. Some people are saying no idea. A lot of people are saying Baldur's Gate. No, it's the Aaron Halo's Gate, okay? So if you guys are familiar with Aaron's Halo, that goes around, what is it, in between Crusader and Hurston distance, or Hurston and ArcCorp distance? I can't remember. It's in between there. The way it's supposed to work is the only way to get into or QT into the Aaron's Halo is to go through these gates. Right now, the Aaron's Halo is like this free place where anybody can go and not be attacked. You think it's the most dumb idea? Well, think of it from this standpoint, is you need choke points, right? But from a physics standpoint, yes, it is one of the dumber ones where you just go above it or below it, like kind of silly. But the idea of having a gate, I think, is to create some choke points. I think is like, this is where you go in and out. So once you're in the Aaron's Halo, maybe you can QT around it. But then once you're, I don't know. I think that's kind of their idea behind it. But maybe they thought it was a bad idea. But in the end, when you go, like, my biggest call out from CIG, and maybe Tomato will touch on this, when it comes to hype, communication, and expectations, it is the ghosting. How many of you have been ghosted by a girl or guy or whomever, you might be dating? It is one of the worst feelings ever. There's no worse feeling than that. And CIG ghosts us on a regular basis. Never easy. Yeah, okay. We found the liar in chat. The SaltEMike ghosted you. Well, you probably deserved it. But that's what they do, right? So they'll put out content and be like, "Yo, check out this cool thing, hype, hype, hype," and then nothing. And this was 3 years ago. Zero on a paramount feature to a this specific star system. In terms of the gameplay that was supposed to go along with it, being a choke point, essentially. Well, no choke point. It's, the Aaron's Hail is really open world. Now, maybe we go back to CitizenCon 2021, where they talked about long distance scanning or whatever, whatever that was called. And maybe that's how you find people in the Halo. But if you can't find people in the Halo, it gets a little... It is so free. And maybe that's a good thing. But just them not explaining their intentions for it leaves me doing what I just did, which is like, maybe,
Fairly. In some cases, such as with the iCache system, that's exactly what happens, and players are made to wait until a solution is discovered before the news is shared. The communication surrounding this project is the best and worst part of it. Over my 4 years covering the game, it has gotten better in some areas and worse in others. And while I appreciate the devs' excitement and their willingness to share things with us, as well as the company's openness with these different types of videos and updates, a big part of the communication is both the consistency following up on those things and clarifications when those things don't turn out in due time, in the name of open development. But if you haven't noticed, there is one thing that has always remained the same throughout all of this communication since I started covering the game. Optimism. Soon is not just...
Of course. Well, why can't you? If you didn't have optimism, nobody would believe you.
a word with this game. It's a philosophy. Delays with Star Citizen are second nature. Back in 2022, the company finally decided it was not accurate enough to predict 4 quarters of progress in the future. So they scaled the roadmap to only show 1 quarter ahead, and even then, it's been a bit iffy.
I would say it's been pretty good. My opinion is it's been a lot better. I don't think it's been a bit iffy. You know, obviously things are still going to come and go, but I think that has been one of the best changes they've made, personally.
To get into Star Citizen, you need to be ready for future delays and missed deadlines. Yes, game development is hard, the code is ever-changing, and software is unpredictable, but this is also a company of 1,000 plus people. That's a lot of places for things to break down. A sick kid at home, a better job offer elsewhere, world events. There are plenty of reasons for problems to compound, and with Star Citizen, it'll save plenty of disappointment keeping that in mind. As a quick example, the Banu Merchantman is a ship people have been excited for years, and while it looked like it was headed into the game last year, it turns out the developers working on it had other opportunities for work, and the ship had to be shelved, much to the community's chagrin.
Yeah, and nobody accepts that as a valid excuse, which is wild to me.
In vain, the Hull C is coming out in Alpha 3.20 this year, but we were seeing it in engine all the way back in 2018, because the work to be done on the ship might have been complete, but the more advanced physics tech and the cargo refactor needed to also be in the game for the ship to function correctly.
That's not a good excuse. Okay, your art director and multiple people, basically everybody who worked on the ship leaves. It's art, dude. It's not like a math equation. You don't go, okay, other smart guy, you go over here and start drawing this. You can't just switch people around when it comes to things like that. As far as art is concerned, is how I understand it. Right? You don't just switch people. So
while the ship might...
that was one of the only delays that I was super pro CIG on, and everybody was losing their mind. That's one that I just don't understand. I think that there's just rabid BMM fans that just can't accept reality. I don't think you understand the level of devastation that that was happening there. Right? The only important people related to the art department are modelers, and that's it. Concept artists are disposable. I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know. I guess concept artists are concept artists, but the modelers are the ones who left.
Have seemed ready 4 years ago, it's only just getting added now. We've been waiting more than 3 years for the Pyro system to enter the game with 4.0, constantly being held back by the addition of server meshing.
Yep.
The why of this is a long story I recently covered on my second channel, but the fact of it remains. Sometimes the messaging and the reality don't match up.
And episode 1. I mean, that's one of the most egregious things of communication, right? Episode 1, server meshing. Where the fuck is episode 2? Where's the post-mortem? What are you doing? What are we playing? Why are we doing this? Right? That's the thing for me. Is where is the communication? There's certain things that we should be like communicated on a fairly regular basis, and it's server meshing or PES and the state of progress of like, all right, well, we have released something, and even if it is, we are still stabilizing PES. We are still working on our long-term persistence database. We are still working on these things. Even if that is an update in every monthly report, it should be there, right? When there are pillars that you're actively working on, not pillars like org system 2.0, there's no update on that. Nobody's I mean, we would like you to update on something like that, but we don't expect you to. I personally expect an update on a very regular basis about the state of where we are with server meshing, right? And I would say once a quarter, maybe in the monthly reports, little tidbits or whatever. It's not like there's no work going on. It's not like they're just staring at the wall. So they have something to say, but they're not saying it. Why?
Optimism, hype, and high expectations can take over before the devs truly know if the tech even works. And this is likely the most painful part of following this game. Take PES for example, the game-changing item database tracking system. It took years to get this system working, and last May it was finally announced to be functioning in a closed environment. 3 to 6 months was likely needed to get it tested and into our hands, but the reality was we wouldn't see the system launch in-game until March of the next year, at which point it broke the game for weeks. It was expected to...
It's still breaking the game for months.
...be difficult, but game development proves itself unpredictable, and everything depends on everything. Crushing ships and grinding them up into materials for crafting purposes depends on damage maps, ship status tracking, and commodity tracking to work. These things depend on PES, which is why we are only seeing their development now. Features like salvage, the cargo refactor, and other things all saw.
Okay, so here's the one thing that I really struggle with not just Tomatoes content, but anybody who is specific. Like, I don't find Tomato to be pro CIG. I think he just likes to follow the development. And so, like, specifically taking their words and saying they needed PES to do this. While that is absolutely true, they do not need all of this insane tech to make a good video game, right? So in order to do it the way they want to do it, they need it. They need the tech, right? At the scale that they do it, at the fidelity, in the way they want to do it, they need all those things. But other games do salvage, other games do cargo hauling, other games do jumping between systems, right? So there's a lot of things that CIG, wants, and that's why we need all these things, and all of those things have been holding the game back. We need a physicalized damage model because we want these weapons to not be able to penetrate this, but then we need to penetrate and hit these specific things and all this, right? And it's just like, yeah. And that was pitched to the backers from day one? No, it was not. Because the game I was pitched is not this game. The game I was pitched, go watch the 2015 Gamescom demo or sitcom demo. I can't remember. It was Landing on ArcCorp. That was the game I backed. That had a loading screen. You did not have control of your ship when landing. The scale was entirely different. You were coming down to a landing zone that was closed off completely. You weren't scaling an entire planet. I backed something different. So this was their choice. And now they're sleeping in that bed. And when people go and just say, well, they need PES, they need server meshing. No, they didn't. They did not need it to make Star Citizen. They needed it to make this version, this moving of the goalposts of Star Citizen. That's how I feel. And being a backer from way back when and knowing what I bought into and what I was excited about, I didn't need any of this stuff. Do I like it? Bro, physicalized cargo is awesome. Awesome. It's my most enjoyable experience in the game currently. Yesterday, Cutlet's group contacts us, tells us, so we're like making a deal with them, and they're getting a percentage, and we're getting a percentage of each pirate hit, and we're doing the logistics, they're doing the pirating, and it's just like working out so well. And I love it, right? I'm so happy with what we have, but you got to remember, they did not have to do this at all. And they would have still had an incredible game, but they chose to. So, I think there's important differentiations to make there, I guess.
Delays because PES saw delays, and every other edition down the line or in a parallel sprint of development can also be delayed because of that. Moving developers from one team to another causes holes that might not get plugged. Considering a game with all these features trying to be developed at the same time, that can get bad. Which brings me to one of the biggest things I've realized over these 4 years. I used to think this game was a crazy idea. As a kid, I always wondered to myself, why don't games just write rules for the world and see what happens when they run? I didn't know what simulators were at the time, so excuse me. But atmosphere, gravity, AI, resources, I wanted to see them run naturally, a bit similar to how Bethesda games work actually. Star Citizen seems to take that approach in many areas. It's meant to be a free-form sandbox that aims to just let you live in space. And that is crazy. I just didn't realize how much.
Yeah.
This is the most ambitious game ever made. I don't think I've ever actually said that because I don't know every game ever made. How could I? But niche games don't take big budgets. It simply doesn't work. You need to be able to market to enough people to make the money back and then some. And the risk is always high the less mainstream your game is.
And they spend all their money on
what
marketing.
if that niche community could provide a big budget? It would make sense that the most successfully crowdfunded game in history also ends up being the most ambitious.
I do like this specific take, right? Is, not needing to do all the things that a publisher does because your community allows you to be that ambitious. But I think what CIG has done with the community support has been relatively unacceptable. And how they've gained that community support, I would say, is even more than relatively unacceptable. If we look back at everything in the hype, communication, and expectations standpoint, well, where do you think that money came from? Creating false expectations, hype where there is none, road to 4.0, all this bullshit that they've done over the years. Right? Yeah, you're not going to get 600 million by promising BattleBit. Not by promising it, but you might make that much by making it.
A lot of that ambition came after the realization of that budget and how much people wanted to see it realized, for better or worse. Let's run through just the most basic explanations of some of Star Citizen's planned professions. Cargo hauling, where you can deliver small valuables, large bulk sales, and anything in between on a multitude of dozens of spaceships. You can do this between space stations, outposts, underground facilities, or cities. You can bring a friend with you, or you could run in a convoy with multiple ships, targeting...
But the goalpost has moved. Because we know that crafting is a thing that's going to be involved now. And I think cargo hauling is going to play way more into crafting than everything that we're talking about in this specific scenario, where it's like the buying and selling. I don't think it's going to be that much there. I think it's going to be more, I mined this material or I bought this material. Now I need to bring it to my processing facility to craft something.
Specific commodities or taking whatever is selling well for that day, bringing a combat escorter or relying on turret gunners. Or screw the hauling. You can just buy the ships, purchase the cargo, and then pay others to deliver it for you, staying out of danger and maybe enjoying your time playing other quests. Or how about salvaging, where you can scrape the hull off the outside of a ship to sell as a general purpose good, or you can crunch a ship up into small blocks of the assorted materials that it's made out of and sell those goods to refineries and factories or use them for crafting. Or you can siphon out the oxygen and fuel from a ship that kept it running when players were using it. But the most valuable
I can't wait for that.
Form will always be removing the weapons and internal components that kept the ship alive.
Yep.
The power supply, shield modules, gravity components, and life support devices that those captains of those ships spent money on to make sure that they were running at tip-top shape. That's now your salvage to sell or use in your own ships. And these same items are used in engineering, a profession that allows players to tune their ships to run specific ways, keep components running so that a ship continues on its mission, and maintain the power network, balancing the power draw of turrets, shields, thrusters, and life support, which also keeps the people on board alive based on the capacity that is available to each ship. That's 3 different options. There's also mining, combat piloting, FPS combat, medical gameplay, hacking, base building, farming, data management, exploration, and refinery gameplay. It's a bit of a bloated mess, but it's also extremely exciting. I've watched the development of some of these systems play out, and it can be bittersweet. We can see.
And for me, none of that excites me. None of that is what I bought into. And that's what I'm like super scared of, is where's the player to player interaction? Where's the motivation? Where's player progression in this? Right? Like, you can name all the things players can do, but for me, everything is beholden on one thing, and it's the why. Right? That's what is, you know, part of every sci-fi movie, part of every other video game you play, is there's always this fire breathing under every player of the why you're doing those things, right? Because you could do any of and Chris has said a lot of this stuff in his like posts and everything. Like, we have more content than Sea of Thieves and dumb things like that, because there's a lot of things you can do, but the game is never really lighting the fire under the player to make them want to do it, right? And that's always been my struggle with the game. Like, man, I had one of the best experiences on Saturday or Friday. Friday we did a mining expedition with my org. So we had a couple moles and a couple prospectors, and then we had a logistics group, right? And the logistics group was overlooking the moon. We were in the C2, doors open. You can see all the party markers on the moon. They're all mining. And then they come back because of the restrictions of the game. They have to come back, drop the bags off to me to go refine them, because I'm going to pay for the refinery jobs. I'm not going to make other players do that. And then we'll pay our players what the total haul ended up making, right? Something like that. So the whole loop was incredible. So you see the potential of the game, of the how it's going to play. But then when you stop and think, why are we doing it in the first place? You realize that none of it mattered. And it's kind of a bummer, right? So what CIG focuses on so much is look at all the things you can do, but where they really need to put their focus is on well, how are we going to motivate players to do those things, right? And then it's still up to the player choice. For me, one of the things is individual player and ship progression should be made in a number of different ways, with reputation, whatever. There could be a number of ways to reach those things. And then I think just generally the way the economy works is so bad, where money doesn't mean anything. There's no gold sinks. There's nothing to sink your money into outside of ships, which with frequent wipes right now, I think is super problematic. But obviously that'll go away in the future. But ships carry you to open additional gameplay. So you still need the why to use those ships. You know what I'm saying? Are you really just continuously going down this loop of getting a new ship? Is that enough? To me, that's not enough. I think to some players, I've seen some comments about it, is that's enough for them. To me, that's not enough for an MMO. I've played a lot of MMOs. Well, not that many, but I've played MMOs, and that's not enough, right?
The interactions between these systems forming, FPS and ship combat are beginning to intertwine. Medical can be relegated to all members or a dedicated medic in many combat situations.
Star, thank you.
Mining,
Thank you so
refining,
much.
and cargo hauling are creating a full game loop, and engineering is showing signs of its presence in cities, outposts, and space stations. The work is coming along, especially over the last 2 years, but it is often a very basic implementation for the sake of an alpha that doesn't progress much further. See, the game right now is not the game we'll be playing, so most features aren't being made for the game right now. This can get very annoying for players who just want to have some fun and enjoy the features we have, but it sometimes feels like the game doesn't even want to be enjoyed.
It doesn't.
We recently talked about...
They don't treat the game like a live service unless it works in their favor for an argument, right? Like, is the game released? Oh, well, it is released, right? Something like that. But you don't treat it like a released game. You don't care about the state of the game. But then when we talk about the state of the game, well, it's an alpha. It's a pre-alpha, right?
Bugs, glitches, and the problems with Star Citizen that don't get fixed, so I won't put you through that again. It's in the relevant links below if you need it. But features don't get fixed or completed because they just need to be built enough for players to test them and confirm the fundamentals work with the game. Look at ship docking, which has only been applied to a couple of ships despite so many having docking ports.
Yeah,
yes,
but not the correct
it
ones.
works in the game and you might need it, but because they just needed to get it working in...
And it works in the game. Like, have you tried to dock to a Starfarer lately? I would argue something doesn't work.
some way, your ship might not actually allow you to dock with the nearby space station. Or how about ship names, which...
Hawk, I'm sorry. I literally turned the volume up because I knew somebody was going to do that, and it still didn't go off. I don't know why.
Many of you may not have realized is a thing. Only available on some ships because, well, the technology needed to be there to connect the player's input to the name that shows up on their ship, but it's not a requirement for the game we're playing right now.
Yeah, who cares?
Physical components allow some ships to provide additional salvage to you, like we mentioned earlier, but not the less updated ships just yet. They still need to be brought up to the gold standard. And the star map gets you where you need to go, but definitely doesn't provide the quality of life you'd expect when navigating across a star system and needing to search for your destination. These are all examples of game systems that have either remained in legacy form or are underdeveloped because there's simply more work to do on them in the...
It's because it's not a game, it's a tech demo. They don't have to make it playable, they just need to prove it could work. Yes, but their if we go all the way back to communication, expectations, and hype, there's so many examples of where they communicate what you just said, and then there's so many examples of where they communicate the opposite. And and that's the problem, is you're getting pulled in so many different directions, and it's just like, geez.
Future. And yes, I know with all of this talk starts to come up feature creep, but looking back over the history of this development, what's been said about the game, and the plans made, most of this is stuff that was planned.
Oh, planning? Oh, okay. And going back and using 10 for the chairman as making this okay, that one's a tough one for me. That one is where I'm going to put tomato on trial here a little bit. You were here in 2018. That's when you got here, where a lot of the expectations were changing and things were realized. When we had 10 for the chairman, you could be like, Chris, are planets going to orbit each other? Are we going to get realistic space travel? Are our solar panels going to work based on the angle of the sun? Are plants going to grow based on the UV spectrum of a given star? And he would have said yes to every single one of those things. So of course, anything that comes out now, you can argue is planned. But what about all the things that were mentioned that haven't come to realization? What about all the design docs of things that don't look like what we have in the game, right? What about all the concept art of ships that have changed? What about all the things that were said that haven't happened? It goes both ways here. So I don't think that one is fair. That one is where, like, I think I have to hold that point accountable, and I just don't agree. Yeah, it's a very loose definition of plan.
They're just now getting to the hard part of actually implementing it into the game. And luckily enough for us, as I've been covering the game, they haven't really tried to introduce new mechanics that much.
But he shows like derelict settlements and stuff, where I guess that's not too new.
What does end up happening is old mechanics expand in scope as they are tied in with other features.
Yes.
So there is still a bit of a problem there. And that problem remains ever persistent.
I think tractor beam gameplay has been fairly, newish. I mean, is there anything that comes to mind that is like very new? A very new change? Like even for me, the procedural planets, totally new thing. I think hull stripping and salvage was always a plan. Long distance scanning, maybe. Crafting is definitely one. There's been numerous times where they said we wouldn't have crafting, right? So the skill system, right? Yeah, dude, there's a number of examples of the opposite side.
As all of this work needs to keep being done to reach feature complete so that we can move on to beta phase. This is a long and drawn out process. It's going nowhere quick, and there's plenty of work to be done yet. I would keep an eye on the developments after 4.0, 4.1, and 4.2, and Squadron 42. But for now, things I think are going to continue slow and steady.
Yeah.
So keep in mind these quirks around communication, the lack thereof, and the resulting expectations that come from it. Star Citizen is a wild ride to follow. You never know what's going to happen, and there's still a lot to do. There's so much potential with Star Citizen. You can see it everywhere you look, but frustratingly, it's going to take a while to fully realize. We haven't even talked about the entirely separate single-player space military story
Because I don't want to get depressed. Can we not talk about it?
being developed at the same time. That's actually what takes up most of the development effort, and so also slows down Star Citizen. But ultimately, this combination of open communication, a game engine that takes so much effort to build, the complexity of the game, and the excitement and optimism that surrounds it leads to heightened expectations and frustrations in features and timelines. What they're doing is truly unique, difficult to replicate, overly ambitious, and a bit of a roller coaster. I don't think anybody can say specifically what this game will end up being outside of those building it, nor can anybody apply a reasonable timeline. There's no doubt in my mind.
Tomato is nauseating? What? I feel like he's like one of the most balanced, well-researched, well put together people I've ever seen. I feel like you're just trying to get me to yell at you in chat. Of all people in this community, for me, he's the least nauseating. It doesn't mean, listen, I certainly have bad takes. I think he had one slightly bad take in this video so far. I don't know how you could see it that way, but I think, yeah, to me, it looks like I'm just being baited in chat. I got one guide. Damn it.
Star Citizen will become an incredibly interesting experience for those who like space sims.
Good job,
but it will continue to be a slow and frustrating crawl for the foreseeable future. And it may not be everything we want it to be, or even everything they've said it will be. It's a moonshot project, and we're all really just along for the ride.
Don't bother yelling, just ban. Now I'm applause.
There's a lot to take in about this game. Like I said, there's nothing else really like it. You don't get to watch Star Wars Eclipse or Elder Scrolls 6 go through their growing pains as the fundamentals of the game are
What is Star Wars Eclipse?
figured out.
Is that the
You
MMO?
don't get to see every No Man's Sky update under construction and in players' hands before the official release.
Because why would you want to? We're gamers. We're gamers. I just want to play the game. I don't care about any of this. This is me personally. Who cares? I don't care about the game's development. That is one thing about like Tomatoes content. I worry for him, actually. I really do. I worry for him in the long term of as Star Citizen develops and becomes more of a game, you're going to find the community, because the people who are become the Star Citizen community are going to become less interested in the game's development and more interested in the game itself. But Tomatoes content is so focused on the game's development because it's what interests him, and he does the best job covering it out of anybody. That is the thing that I worry for him long term, is if you're not focusing on the game as more as we move forward. I think it's totally fine the way he's covering the game right now, but I don't want to see other games under the hood, because I've learned enough that I don't care about any of this, right? I want the game. I want to play a game. That's it. And anybody who backed this for any other reason, I can't comprehend. I think deep down, everybody was hoping for a cool game, right? Did you really spend $10,000 to just watch them build it and not play it? Well, I mean, the PTU drama says otherwise, right? 95% of people don't play it more than a couple hours in the PTU phase. But yeah, I mean, you could get both, but the idea of, in reality, I think the initial draw had to be the game, right? Like,
But when those things are available to you, you'll also be able
no one paid $25K to get into Wave 1. Literally, somebody said that in my comments, and like, for the reason why they deserved it. And dude, I did the math for them of what it would cost to subscribe to get into Wave 1, and I was like, you must be the dumbest person on earth then. Because why would you spend that amount of money to get into Wave 1 when you could have done it so much cheaper?
to play them as pretty smooth experiences. Mostly. I guess that's becoming less true with even the biggest game releases, but you get my point.
That happened to me.
Star Citizen is not for everyone. Even in its final form it won't be. But right now, most people should not be playing it. I tell people every single week on my stream to stop playing the game, because for some people it is too slow, frustrating, and oftentimes broken. Many are here
Just
for
take
what
a
the
break.
game will become. It doesn't mean that you need to play it constantly until then if it causes you frustration. And that's my main message after 4 years of covering this game. Beyond the hype, tempering expectations, fun gameplay, informative panels, shows, conventions,
Tony Z deepfake Pog.
annoying marketing, the most important thing is your own enjoyment. If the game is frustrating you, taking too long, or just not what you're interested in at the moment, play the other great games on the market. Check in occasionally here on YouTube to get the latest. The game's not going anywhere. Thank you for sticking.
For the first time ever, I worry that the game might be in trouble, that it might go somewhere. I am actually very, I'm becoming increasingly concerned.
Around for the entirety of this video. This was a long one and a bit rambly, I'm not gonna lie. But after so long
I
of
thought it was
covering the
not
game, I
rambly
wanted
at
to
all.
talk a bit more candidly about my feelings. I appreciate you listening, and as a sign of that appreciation, we'll drop you a secret code here for my ongoing August ship giveaway. Enter below. And consider subscribing to the channel for more space game news, videos, and updates. I'll be covering favorites like Star Citizen and Starfield, as well as future titles like Star Wars Outlaws on this channel, my second channel, my podcasts, and my live streams. And if you really want to get into discussion or play with the group, jump on our Discord or join our Star Citizen org below. Finally, if you want more in-depth videos like this every month, you can become a supporter on Patreon for monthly exclusives, behind-the-scene updates, and your referral code in our own randomizer. I really hope you were able to learn something new from this video. Thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Dude, it was a great video. He's done... Hold on, there we go. He's done a really, really solid job of like going back into the history and time with a lot of the stuff that's been going on, and then, you know, inserting some of his feelings and opinions on it. I thought it was great, and it just allows for so much. It's thought-provoking content. It allows for so much discussion around it, is because we've all, when it comes to Star Citizen's development, we've all come in at different times. We've all experienced it slightly differently. We all had different expectations. And yeah, I thought it was great. I just think that that's so good. And I've really been enjoying the content he's been putting out lately. But whew, it is certainly a roller coaster, as he said.